But now I would like to introduce with the next speaker, who is Tīna Alise Drupa, who's recently completed a bachelor's degree in Human Ecology at the College of the Atlantic, Maine, USA. And her academic interests, and by the way, currently also a master's student at the Art Academy of Latvia. And her academic interests and practice explore the intersection of political ecology, ontological design, multispecies storytelling, and critical pedagogy. And she's interested in exploring diverse forms and methods of research and design that contribute to the dialogue of multispecies relations. And Tīna is also one of the co-founders and experimental research and of the experimental research and design project CSS Pluriversity. And this learning community explores conditions of unlearning in order to relearn ways of living in times shaped by increasing uncertainty. Welcome, Tīna.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. It's been really inspiring morning of seeing everyone's practices and how the knowledge is applied. As was introduced, I'm also not the co-founder of CES Pluriversity, but also part of the learning community and the student myself. And I was not thinking I'm going to share this story, but I think it's relevant. I arrived of this idea of exploring our existing and emerging relationships between culture and nature in this contemporary time, because I'm from a kind of activist background of thinking more in climate politics, and how I started with interest in really international arena and places. So when I went to COP25, I remember I was interested of going in discussions with people who were in carbon markets, and I was thinking that I'm going to find their little lies as in activist spaces, framing them as false solutions. And when I went to the discussions, I realized that I really believe that those are solutions and that it could change how we interact and where the finance goes. And so I thought it was important to take a step back and think of these assumptions that we have inherited as the modern society of what builds up our understanding of nature and what therefore we think we're going to go and shape these solutions. So I kind of stepped back and I went more into a much more local approach of thinking through a garden as this space and going into exploring it through these multi-species relationships and maybe that this possible place and thinking this through this kind of lens could allow us to think beyond anthropocentrism and the imaginary that could lead to a productive conversation and imagine us as with other beings and acknowledge their agency. So, need water. As I'm talking about learning and unlearning, I want to offer a gift to you all, which is a seed agreement. As we know, we are consumers-driven society, and also that often unintentionally comes also into knowledge and how we fall into consuming knowledge. And this often can come out in the relationships that we want to find the information as an immediate convenience, application, and comfort. So I'm finding maybe disappointment if it doesn't serve this kind of ideas. So the seed agreement, which is inspired by a different project, kind of prompts that we should maybe reframe these reframe learning when we approach it. So this kind of agreement we go into, that this consumption-based idea of knowledge is kind of a candy, but we can go into agreement that it's more of like a seed, that you have to have soil and planting, watering, and attending with care in order to harvest. So the agreement I kind of rephrased in these short phrases, but first would be that that learning may not have immediate practical application, and that's fine. I do not have to agree with what's presented or shared, but I'm happy to learn and see what happens. Third, I may feel uncomfortable, confused, or frustrated by the process, but I take responsibility of observing, learning of my conscious and unconscious responses and resistances. And lastly, it is up to me to decide when to push myself further or when to reflect and observe. And I think it's adjustment of ways we can engage with spaces of learning or knowledge. And through that kind of approach or relational way of entering a space, I want to introduce Thesis Pluriversity, which consists of creating learning conditions that would allow to explore in a humble way what it means to be human today through people being open to this unknown and possibilities of coming together and learning. And this learning has been taking place through online and in-person events of lectures or workshops or more experimental ways of interacting. And one of the pictures, also, both of the pictures, but the pictures from the summer school that takes place, this one was the third one, and is not the main but central event, kind of that allows for people to gather for a week. And even though it is a project or with learning conditions that kind of centers geography, design, and philosophy in order to departure into exploring ontological and other realms of how it is to live today and how we can address it critically, or just look at it from a different kind of perspective and come with questions, similarly proposed, rather than answers. As it is project-based, more in this learning conditions and relational way of thinking, there is also a manifestation physically, which is the Permaculture Garden UME, which is based in Cēsis, and it emerged through, the idea emerged through workshops in first summer school. However, it has been evolving, and also this year we were honored to be shortlisted as one of the finalists for New European Bauhaus Prize. And that's allowed to welcome into community of transformational learning places. And so as the garden, it was a starting point to gather for thinking of ways we can share, ways of making care and thinking through a space, as my interest is kind of to question these human-nature relationships. I was interested in how this specific place and locality can explore that. And of course, we can think of like, okay, a garden kind of commonly thought of is a place where humans garden for their needs and to make to grow food, and how can that be a way of maybe moving away from anthropocentric thinking. However, I was inspired by Maria Puig de la Bella Casa, who's in her book of Matters of Care, she writes and reminds us of the embodied interdependency of life. And I think a garden allows in this really personal and small scale to explore or have an this entryway of exploring these relationships. And she writes, without caring for other beings, we cannot care for humans. Without caring for humans, we cannot care for the ecologies that they live in. And therefore, we can possibly explore these natural cultural ethics and how care manifests through these everyday personal and collective practices. So the permaculture frame gives an ethical and design principle to work with because it is decentralized ecological movement, but at the same time it allows for really situated needs of a place that are social and ecological. But at the same time, yeah, it can be scaled up and communicated to different places. So a growing number of practitioners, theorists, and scientists are recognizing the need for places that are geared towards mobilizing imaginative acts. And human geographer Catherine Yusuf states as these acts open new spaces and practices for dealing with the effects of living with uncertain futures, as they provide a tangible form to the imagination of different worlds outside of constraints of the given present. So here kind of comes in the way of approaching that this place holds the room to have this imagination and for people to interact and untangle these inherited ideas or that the modern society has socialized and accepted or naturalized, if you want to say, of hierarchies, human exceptionalism, and so on. So, in this picture, I wanted to capture or honor at least soil and the way soil is an agent and ally to think about beyond these simple dichotomies of and extends the dichotomy of life and non-life, and also as the topic is about thinking and working with binaries, I think soil is an important agent to talk about. And the garden, I wouldn't say simplify, but you could say it as it can be seen as this big compost pile where organizers or activities, facilitated activities, can take place, and we can engage and compost these ideas in order to make productive soil for something to emerge. And this emergent aspect where if you intentionally gather, but not probe with a direction of a solution, that there's possibility for something to happen. And as well as that, you know, this life and non-life aspect that extends what we understand as soil, where technology today has allowed to see microbial life and understand that creatures do not live in the soil, but they are the soil. So ways we can understand this relationality of ourselves and what's around us, because soil nests all terrestrial life in a wider metabolism where it is localized every place, but at the same time it can be a metaphor to these processes that are messy and there are a lot of unknowns that are presented. And this idea of poetics was that is mentioned as this emergence was explored in our summer school this year, and I think one of the most beautiful things is that what you can only experience when only those people who are in a place come together and engage with the openness that learning can offer of critical questions. And Just a small example that emerged was when one of the last days we felt the need to verbalize or collectively share of what we have cultivated or gathered as a group. And it was created as a jar for conserving these, what was created there as collectively as a group, as values and needs in order for us, as in the winter, to have a jar of when the harvest has ended, and to bring this inspiration and what was created there, to return to that. And and exploring to that, as I know the time is running out, and I was really excited to share a lot of things. It's just allows me to dive in on how many ways we can think of these ecologies, and not only of the ecologies that is the more than human, but how they intervene with everything that was shared today, and how a specific place is not only for when we traditionally think of a garden for food or just sharing a place, but it can be an ontological inquiry and layering it with expanding what gardening means. And therefore I end kind of with unknown ability, which is a phrase that I use inspired through a conversation with Danielle Kellermeyer, which is a multi-species kind of author, which she says it's not limiting, but rather she considers the unknown as a reminder that we should not search for familiar forms in the other, but look ways to re-experience ourselves as entangled beings, and come from this, see this familiarity through the difference and ways we can re-experience that. And through some of the workshops, I've found that clay can be a way to play and understand that as a non-life kind of form that has really specific materiality. And so I'm excited to further explore that. But also this unknown ability is kind of the limitation that I reached, because when the garden was already happening, but I had to go back to US to study, and I was doing a lot of the writing part there, and I kind of run into this paradox of how knowledge is situated, and I was doing exactly what maybe should be avoided, but I came to the conclusion that this knowledge is situated, and I felt that I was running in circles of these lessons or relations that I felt I couldn't reach the specificity, and therefore I see all of this gathering as this composting and soil for these situated knowledges to emerge. And therefore, nested, and thinking about nested imaginary, that only through specific conditions they are not accessible anywhere else. So therefore, the soil is cultural, traditional, folkloric, political, and these entanglements impact the way the imaginaries will configure and emerge above the ground. The specificity highlights the importance to multiplicity of local imaginaries that will create change, and how these local projects have localized importance while they'll be connected through underground networks. Thank you.